Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In the fall of 2019, the MIT Press was awarded an $850,000 grant from the Arcadia Fund for an ambitious project. Over a 3-year period, the press planned to develop a sustainable business model to allow it to release its front and back lists of monographs open access. And by the end of the 3-year project, MIT Press plans to make its model freely available to the university press community to adapt for their own open access ambitions. Back in April 2020 on the Authority File, we met with Terry Ealing, Director of Strategic Initiatives at MIT Press, and Raim Crow, a senior consultant at Spark, who was working with MIT Press on the OA publishing model project. At the time, they were conducting a deep dive into the monograph publishing market, studying the mind-bending array of variables to construct a foundation upon which to build the press's OA framework. You might want to go back and listen to those episodes, numbers 118 through 121, if you haven't already. Fast forward a year, and MIT Press has landed on a collective action pricing model called Direct to Open that they're about ready to roll out for their catalog. If successful, MIT Press will open all of its monographs, about 90 titles per year, starting in 2022 across its STEAM, humanities, and social sciences categories. Joining me for an update on the project are Emily Farrell, Library Partnerships and Sales Lead at the MIT Press, and Greg Yao, President of the Center for Research Libraries. In our second episode of our 4-part series sponsored by MIT Press, we talk about Direct to Open's collective action model and how it fits into library budgets and needs. So also, the last time we spoke on this program, the press was examining some of the design criteria for the project, particularly in terms, and I'm thinking like sort of operationally and for the press itself, particularly in terms of its impact on existing editorial operations, within the existing monograph publishing process. For example, no fundamental changes to in-production costs, making things immediately available, having a variety of open licenses, that kind of thing. Curious to see if those criteria have quote unquote, survived, and where have you landed, post-design in terms of the operational structure of the model?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. It's incredibly important to us to continue to sort of uphold the sort of editorial and production integrity that the press has. It's central to what we do. It's central to the program and to ensuring that the sort of high quality of scholarship that we publish remains so. Mm-hmm. And it's something we need to be able to tell to our authors that, there's huge benefit here in being able to make your work open access, in the potential for increase in downloading, increase in visibility and citation potentially, and our acquisitions editors need to be able to reassure our authors that the shepherding process remains the same. Your proposal will still be reviewed in the same ways by your peers. You will see the same copy editing, the production processes. We will still be offering these books in print because that's incredibly important to our authors as well. So all of those pieces and marketing as well, which is an incredibly important piece mm-hmm. of this, to make sure that our authors feel that their work is appearing in the places it should, at the professional conferences it needs to, all of those sorts of things that we do, regardless of whether someone pays for the ebook once it's published in that sort of more traditional model. So all of those things have remained. And likewise with, the plan is still, after assessing everything and moving forward with this model, the real focus is making sure these works are open at publication. Mm-hmm. So, we haven't brought in any embargoing or, anything like that for these books. We really want to make these monographs open as they publish, and that will happen assuming success of the model this year and getting library support. We will be immediately opening books next year, so 2022.
Okay, excellent. So I guess one of the issues with a collective action or support model is being able to maximize participation, obviously. Different institutions have different policies. and aligning maximal participation with scalability and equitability is a challenge. How do you see this playing out with your model?
It's definitely a challenge. We have been lucky to be working on the model development with Rain Crow, who you spoke with before, who has quite a lot of experience in building collective action models and an understanding of that. So the design of it itself takes into account some of these challenges. So in one part, there's the pure collective good of making these works open access. At the same time, libraries that support the model will also gain access to the corresponding back catalogue of monographs and edited books, which is somewhere around, it's over 2,000 titles. And that's for the year of the library commits to the year of support and receives access to this content. So there is something of a self-interest built into it as well. And one of the interesting additional sort of appeals of the model, I would say, for libraries is that we plan to have a commitment window this year, later in the year. And once that closes, if we haven't actually met the threshold we need and we can't make any books open, any library that has agreed to commit to the model will still get that back file access and will not have to pay for anything. So there really is quite a lot of incentive, I think, to support the model.
Yep. Excellent. Greg, I'm curious to see or hear your perspective on this, particularly as a librarian, but also, the consortial kind of aspect of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that speaking as a librarian, before I got to CRL, one of the challenges in the ebook space, open or not, is that it's complicated at every single level. It could be complicated, whether it's strategy, whether it's workflows, whether it's financing, whether it's licensing issues. I mean, it's a really complicated and messy space. And I think that now that I'm in a consortial environment, I'm really keen for the Center for Research Libraries, being a cooperative effort. We're really just a research library collection at scale, just one big resources department or one big collection development department. Really identifying some experiments that we think deserve special attention. Right, right, because one of the most challenging issues is just knowing where to allocate your attention. There's so many different experiments and so many different models. How can you possibly, adjudicate where to spend time and attention? And from my vantage point at CRL, there are a handful of presses and partners that research libraries really need to be partnering with. PLOS is one, and MIT Press is another. So I really want to use CRL and our community to say, look, community, here's something that really needs our attention. And whether or not this model works or in the details, who knows? But we need to be working with MIT Press and similar mission-driven academic publishers to figure out what we're doing at the level of strategy, pricing, licensing, in workflows. I think one of the successes of this model is that it can just help us continue to change the conversation that libraries are having with publishers. And this, so I'm going to say something that may sound like if I'm pointing the finger anywhere, I'm pointing it at myself, right? But so as a librarian in the past, when I'm acquiring content, I'm purchasing content. So I'm negotiating hard. I'm looking for good licensing terms. I'm looking for good pricing terms. So I'm really pushing hard and negotiating hard because I'm acting as a procurement agent. And it occurs to me that that's a hammer. That's one tool in the librarian toolkit. Negotiate hard, advocate hard, and that's an essential tool. But if I go into a negotiation with commercial publishers with that hammer, well, then that's exactly the tool I want to bring to that conversation. But if I bring that hammer to a tool and I'm working with MIT Press or Plus, then that doesn't show that I'm like a savvy negotiator. It shows that I might be using the wrong tool
Mm-hmm.
for this conversation. I'm trying to so I want to use CRL and use that platform to help research libraries focus attention, precious attention, on a few experiments that I think deserve a special attention and partnership. And this is and there's many,
Mm-hmm.
but this is certainly one of them.
That's great. And I'm curious, and Emily, I'll ask this with you too, but Greg, how collective action, that kind of model might fit in with the library's budget or needs, if they were to sort of look at this as something they wanted to do. And this would be perhaps for our listeners who haven't yet embarked on a relationship like that.
Yeah, I think you'd have to assess what is the value proposition? What are we looking to get from the partnership, from the experiment? And it could very well be using that hammer that I referred to earlier, and that's my hammer. That's not that's the hammer I use. So it's a finely honed hammer. But if I look at a partnership like this, only looking at certainly you need to look at price. Certainly, you need to look at licensing terms. Certainly, you need to look at content. Um, but that's not all we should be looking at. We should also be looking at what kind of experiments and partnerships does this get us seated at the table for? What kind of further conversations does this allow us to participate in? What kind of data, and I think that we're going to talk about data and metrics later, what kind of data and metrics would this allow us to capture and leverage? Not just among publishers, but among libraries about what our faculty, what our students, what our users are using and not. So I think that there are different ways to capture the value proposition for partnerships, and I think that one of the main value propositions will say, is if you can say, like, here's an experiment. There are a handful of experiments that really deserve full-throated support, and let's just go all in and see what we can learn from it. I did this earlier on in my career with Project Muse, another press,
Mm-hmm.
another effort I support, and it was about 10 years ago when Project Muse brought their ebook product to market. And it was unlimited downloads, PDF format. It was a pretty good user interface. And I remember we were looking at it I was at Yale at the time, and we were trying to figure out, should we invest in this? And so we're talking about it, and we said, well, we already own so much of this content in print, and it duplicates that. And oh my goodness, even further, we actually own a lot of this content in it's an e-library, and so we've already duplicated so much of this content, and we can't even figure out what we have already and what we don't. It's going to take so much work to suss that out. And so finally, I just came into work and I just said, look, we're buying all of it. We're going to buy all of this. This is an experiment we have to experiment in. This is Project Muse. This is Johns Hopkins Press. We have to figure out, let's go all in on this and let's put an experiment around this. Mm-hmm. Let's buy all of it and let's see if we can capture metrics. All right, we own these titles in Project Muse, unlimited downloads as PDFs. We also own it, in the stacks or in print, and maybe we own it in an offsite storage facility in print. Let's line up the call numbers and see what users do, and gather this really interesting user set to see what preferences are across call numbers and subject range. And so when we looked at it, not as should we buy this content possibly for a third or fourth time, with that, if that's the lens, well, absolutely not. Yeah. But when the lens said, well, let's partner with presses to go on this journey together, then it got really exciting. And it's like, well, how could we not do it? Right. And I feel the same way with this experiment here with MIT Press and what Emily's talking about. I want to go on this journey with MIT Press, and see where we can get together, where we can go together.
Excellent. So, and Emily, I'm very curious to hear what you might have to say about this as well, in terms of conversations you may have already had with, prospective partners.
Yes. So I think that, I suppose, to start with concerns first, and connecting to some of what Greg said, we certainly hear And also heard when we launched our own ebooks platform, we heard this makes the landscape more complicated. This adds an administrative level that we didn't have before. That there are certain burdens that may increase. But I think, again, in thinking about this as a partnership and as a collaborative effort, as a collective action approach, there is a lot of benefit in being able to have these conversations directly and say, look, we're not doing this to make things more complicated. We're doing this because now we can have this conversation with each other and we can experiment. We launched our ebooks platform, which is now what will enable us to push forward this open access program and will enable us to work together with libraries on getting those metrics, assessing how this sort of thing could potentially work. And really, if we're looking forward towards what are the sort of success markers for this, that we see this push a culture change more broadly that moves us away finally from worrying about, well, what is the value of monographs? We don't see high usage for monographs, focusing on metrics that don't actually make sense in a lot of ways with these sorts of works, because it is about the value proposition of monographs is still clear when you look at the author side. It's still clear in the tenure and promotion practices. All of those things are there. It's also clear that there's not a market fit. So we've needed to step outside the traditional model for a good while.
Yeah.
And I think in doing it together, collaboratively, the hope is that we can sort of push through the conversations that focus on the difficulties of it and really look at where we want to get to, and getting through this experiment, finding how this investment can be worthwhile and getting there through these experiments, because we need to make these steps first. We need to take the chance and take this risk in trying to do this model as the press that we are. We have a history of innovative work. We want to do it. We're really enthusiastic, and not all presses are well placed to do that. Mm-hmm. They need the experiment to be done first by a larger press, for instance.
Right.
And I think ideally we'd be able to come out the gate with 200 presses doing this at the same time. And for libraries, that'd be perfect. You don't have to, do individual purchasing. You've got them all at once. Everything goes open. But we need to proof of concept of this one first, and then with a real hope that this will move everything, make that this will be larger and this will be beyond us.
Yep. So Greg, I think, was talking a little bit about, unless I misunderstood, but sort of a really kind of a collaborative effort between the library and the press in terms of working together and exploring the model and sort of going on a journey together, as he described it. Emily, is MIT Press kind of ready to be doing that with the libraries that you work with? In this first year or so of experiment, kind of getting the model off the ground. Just kind of work really closely with your partners as you embark on this.
Yes, that's what we've been trying to do. So in the last 4 months or so, we've started talking with consortia, because really, the focus for us is trying to work with consortia as partners. That's primarily because of the size we are. We don't have a whole lot of people on the ground to do that individually with institutions. So we've had some fantastic and very positive conversations with consortia internationally about how we can ensure that we have put something together that's going to be appealing to their member libraries. And during that process, we have gone back and adjusted the model, changed how it looks. We've incorporated different tiering to account for how different countries work, for instance. So we have more tiering bands for different consortia in different countries. So we've certainly had the chance to get really great feedback from consortia and build that into the model. So that has felt quite collaborative. We've also gotten feedback. I mean, we're lucky enough to have a close relationship with the MIT libraries and feel there's always an open door in talking about how how we can strengthen our effort. And the overwhelming feeling in talking to libraries and taking this feedback on board, going back and saying, okay, this is what we've done, how's this looking, has been the feedback, and it has been collaborative. It has been sort of this, we want to help you make this successful. And that's been hugely affirming.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, so let's, if you don't mind, maybe dig a little bit more into the model itself. And so if I was a librarian coming to you and saying, okay, tell me about, how does this work for me? What are my commitments here? What do I need to do?
Right. So the model itself, it's focused on our monographs and scholarly edited books.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking to get commitments from libraries to, as I said, open the front list books. We have made sure to take into account collection size, the size of the institution. We have about 15 tiering levels in this model. So we really want to try to cater to a particular institution's abilities to fund this model collectively. And what a library will do is pledge to support the model. We'll know by the end of September whether the model's been successful. A library can choose to support the whole set of books, or we have also split the list in two so that it gives it just a little bit more of a chance to at least be partially funded. Mm-hmm. So we have a humanities and social sciences collection, and we have a STEAM collection, so STEM plus art and design. And so libraries that are more focused on acquiring humanities and social sciences books can put their efforts there. But we also, the threshold still doesn't move. So if we do fully fund the humanities and social sciences collection, any amount above the threshold for that collection cascades over into the STEAM collection until that's fully funded. And then above that, above the full collection threshold, it will be redistributed. So the tiering that a library will see will be the absolute maximum that they will pay mm-hmm. for the collections. The pricing, because it's a collective action model, is the lowest it really can be for each library, particularly on a per title basis. And it will enable all these scholarly books to be open from publication in 2022, and that libraries get the benefit of this back catalogue access. Alongside that, because they'll be on our platform, we know what we can provide counter data. We have the administrator portal that we use on our platform, which is all very easy to use. Libraries can grab counter stats from that portal whenever they need them. So there will be an ability for us, but also for the library to monitor how this content is being used and to really sort of see the metrics on what their support is doing for this content, which I mm-hmm. think is important.
Okay. What are those tiers based on generally?
So they're a combination of Carnegie classifications, mm-hmm. FTE, as well as the best estimates that we could get on collections budget size, and also sort of weighted to depending on the number of institutions in those categories, so that we could make a reasonable estimate of how many of each type of library would come on board to get us to the financial point that we need to be in. So, there's still a good amount of flexibility there in that we don't know exactly yet how many of those libraries from each class will come on board in the model. Mm-hmm. But yeah, those were the major factors, sort of the some of the Carnegie data, FTE, and collection budget as well.
Okay. And then in order for this to be considered successful, you'll need about how many libraries to sign on?
It's sort of still in adjustment. I mean, as I said, there's sort of there are sort of hopes. I mean, we definitely will need a good number of libraries internationally to come on board with the model, but it really will depend on how many libraries we see at each level and the way that those adjust. And we're still doing a little bit of finalization on what that looks for international libraries, which then has an effect on, because the threshold stays the same, has an effect on what we're doing in the US. So there's still some, adjustment that will continue within reason.
Yeah.
So we don't know the exact number yet, but we have, as I said, sort of presented it to some consortia, and we did get some feedback saying you might want to reduce the number of libraries and increase the fees so that you really making this in reach, making it more likely that you'll succeed. And so that was really helpful feedback to get, because we, on one hand, we do want to make this as affordable for libraries as possible, but if we're expecting 1,000 libraries to come on board, then it's going to make it very difficult for us to get it over the line.
Right. You just heard from Emily Farrell, Library Partnerships and Sales Lead at the MIT Press, and Greg Yao, President of the Center for Research Libraries. This 4-part series is brought to you by the MIT Press. Join us next week when we dig deeper into Direct to Open's model, key performance indicators, and how models like these can re-engage libraries and university presses.
There are so many conversations going on the library side about commercial consolidation, about the importance for university-owned infrastructure, and that's what university presses are. We are university infrastructure, and we do have a different view on, or are able to be more part of the conversation about things like data privacy, about archiving and why that matters. I think that there are a lot of, it's easy to sort of summarize that all by saying mission alignment, values alignment, but I think the great thing about having these conversations directly is that we can talk about all the pieces of that and what that means. How are we approaching open data? How are we approaching, university repositories? How are there ways that we can be doing that better as a press that is part of an institution? But the conversations do have to be, sometimes it is about it being the ice cream social, that it is, a conversation in the ways that those sort of comfortable, friendly conversations happen between sales reps at commercial presses and with librarians, because of the resources that are available at those sorts of presses.
If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.